Hello and welcome back to this tutorial where we will continue our introduction to the Archer batching system configuration and overview. So far we have introduced the load detail, basic configuration, and how to enter materials as well as products. In this tutorial, we will dive back into running the batch system using the plant monitor. We will also venture further into batching using the load setup window and discuss ways to override out of tolerance batches. The plant monitor provides a direct interface between you and your plant. This virtual control panel is a graphical representation of your plant, allowing you to monitor its operation while batching, discharging, or standing idle. The plant monitor is also where you manually control all devices connected to the control system. From here, you will also start and stop functions that are not operated automatically. Obviously, any plant activity will be reflected in the plant monitor, and therefore it works in conjunction with the loads window when batching automatically. The converse is true also when any manual batching from the plant monitor is reflected in the loads window. To open the plant monitor, click on the green button at the top right of the Archer window. The layout of the plant monitor is customized and configured to meet the exact requirements of your operation, although your facility probably differs from what I have on my screen, including that of a central mix or product plant. We will use this example of a ready mix operation to illustrate the plant monitor's functions. As you can see, different materials and other controls are separated into groups. Each group is identified by a blue rectangular region and is normally titled in the lower left or right hand corner. The elements represent vessels or machines and are appropriately identified. The darker blue rectangle elements represent buttons. Those are titled and indicated their function, and the others represent gates, valves, and motors that correspond to an adjacent configuration. Sometimes buttons will be of another color to add clarity, such as red reset button. The graphics depicted scales have titles that change according to the current state. They can read idle when empty and charged otherwise. While the scales are being filled or discharged, they will read charging or discharging respectively. In addition to the scale status, weight indication is also displayed dynamically as weight increases or decrease. Volume counts for metered materials are also dynamically displayed for each bottle, but without the benefit of seeing its idle or charge status. Similar to the scale status, titles are other text regions that dynamically update. Some of these include truck numbers, mixer status, and moisture readings. You'll notice that when you hover over various devices, buttons on the plant monitor, the background will change to orange color, identifying areas where you can click to perform manual function through the screen. Any of these buttons can be selected in a momentary state, such as filling an aggregate material, cement, or admix bottle, or a maintained state, such as a conveyor or pump. In either event, you will have full manual control using the mouse and clicking on these buttons. Using the right-click button on your mouse, you can also bring up configurational aspects of each of the elements. Some devices contain subcomponents, such as a load cell to a scale, and the status panels for each of the additional buttons for you to select and configure. Additionally, weighing devices have buttons that allow you to zero or calibrate the scale. Gate and valve devices normally designed for material fills have a latch button. When you click the latch button, the related device will stay on until you click the latch button again or click on the device on the plant monitor. You can use latch function instead of using click and hold technique for opening gates and valves. Regardless of the device, you can easily access this function settings by clicking the configure button. There are several button styles used on the plant monitor, and there are two types of button actions. Some require a mouse click to activate and another click to deactivate. Other buttons activate when you click and hold and deactivate when released. Since all button types change color when activated, they will also act strictly as indicators when automatically batching. When switched on, Charge Enable allows scales and metered materials to automatically discharge in their prescribed sequence. Charge Enable is toggled on and off by clicking on it. Charge Enable can also be configured to switch off automatically after each load or each draw. The red reset button allows you to reinitialize the plant monitor after a canceled batch. You can also put a running load into hold. The reset button must be held on for a short duration before actuating. This delay is normally preset for 3 seconds and can be seen counting down when clicking on it. Fill buttons for materials have momentary action. This means you must click and hold the button to open a gate or valve, and it will remain open until you release your hold. Button styles differ for gates and valves, as well as their appearance when activated. Material fills are usually designed with an open delay, so the action of opening a gate or valve manually will not be immediately apparent. This menu shows the different states and styles of the buttons. The discharge buttons are similar in graphic design to their fill button counterparts. These buttons have two distinct regions denoted with a plus and minus symbol, and are therefore really two different buttons. The left plus button opens the gate or valve, whereas the right minus button closes it. If a scale is designed with two inching gates, you must click and hold the corresponding button to open or close the gates. Otherwise, a single click on the appropriate button is sufficient to start or stop the discharge. If a scale is configured with a vibrator and that scale reaches near empty, you can click and hold the open plus button to manually activate the vibrator. Along with the fill and discharge buttons, the plant monitor may have several buttons devoted to other functions. These buttons may be different colors and sizes, but will be labeled with their purpose. How a button acts when operated will depend on its function. Alternate action buttons or toggles require a single click to turn on and off. The button color will change when it is on in an on state. These buttons are normally used to start and stop a device, but are also used for other purposes. Momentary action buttons require you to click and hold, switching on the corresponding device until your hold is released. The button color will change while the button is activated. The plant horde button is an example of this type. Multi-button arrays are a group of two or more buttons that react to you and each other. The purpose of the button group will dictate how they function. In any case, clicking on a button will activate it, and normally a second click will deactivate it. Usually when one button in the group is switched on, the others will be switched off. The button colors will change accordingly for the current active and inactive buttons. One purpose of using a button group is to switch one device or another, but not at the same time, and still retain the ability to switch either of them off. An example of this is the aeration auto and aeration manual buttons. Status indicators look like buttons but operate on their own, acting simply as a lamp on a conventional control panel. Status indicators will change color when they are on. An example of this may be to monitor silo levels. The truck loadout section also has some features to look for. The gadget that we use down here is the slider and is used to dynamically change the discharge rate. The slider is scaled from 0 to 200, with 100 being the standard rate of discharge. To change the settings, click on the slider at the appropriate interval. This action will reposition the index knob, change the length of the yellow gauge, and update the absolute value displayed to the right. Alternatively, you can drag the slider from its index to the left or right to make changes. All changes entered using the slider will update the truck profile so that it will be retained for future loads. The shroud controls can be controlled here as well. These devices may also be termed lift frame and hood or curtain, among others. These controls are usually paired as shown, but may appear on your screen separately if only one or the other is needed. Changing the position of either of these devices is afforded by clicking on their corresponding up and down buttons. This graphic element depicted here is the belt conveyor. Devices associated with these controls can be started and stopped by clicking on their button regions. When running, these controls become enhanced to show movement and direction. Often these elements are augmented with time values that reflect the remaining belt clear time. Augers or screws are similar to belts but have indicators that identify them with rigid indentations to show the direction of the screw as it turns. Optionally, you can also have a tilting mixer control. Mixer and writing this device is accomplished by clicking on the respective buttons to the right of the mixer graphic. When the mixer is running or emptying, the graphic becomes animated to show rotating and staging positions as well as changing colors when charged. A stationary mixer control is used for a ribbon or paddle mixer with a discharge gate underneath. When the mixer is running, the graphic becomes animated to show rotation and changes color to show its charge state. Just like scale discharge controls, click on the discharge buttons to open or close the gate. The button graphic will indicate the gate's open or close condition. Finally, you can have turn heads or swivel chute, diverters, or flop chutes look like the one that I'm showing here. The graphic will animate to show relative position, but more precisely, the number of buttons will highlight accordingly. The number of buttons on the control is configured to match the number of positions of the plant device. Click on a numbered button to set the device into motion and position it. If the left and right buttons are configured, click and hold to rotate the device. Release your click to stop the device. When a load is created, it is placed on the stack pane of the loads window. If there is already a batch in progress, or there are other loads otherwise pending, the new load will be added to the end of the stack. Basic information is displayed for each load, showing the product code, load size, number of draws, ticket, truck, job, number, water trim, and destination if applicable. Also, the left of each load region is an indicator showing the status of the load. To manage the stack, you first select a load from the list and perform one or more operations to manipulate it. To select a load, click anywhere in the loads region. The selected load will be highlighted to indicate that it is the active selection in either the hold load button or the release load, and cancel buttons will be enabled. If applicable, the move up and move down buttons will also become enabled. To put a load on hold, you can click the hold load button to temporarily stop batching the currently running load. In itself, this action does not abort the batch, allowing you to analyze the load or troubleshoot plant problems. The hold load button will revert to release load, and the cancel button will be enabled. The status indicator for load will also reflect the held condition. After a load is held, you have the option to continue batching or aborting it altogether. Clicking on the release load button will resume batching, and the status indicator will change to a different status indicator. There are several common tasks you can perform quickly without opening the load editor or otherwise manipulating a stacked load. These tasks are available on the shortcut menu, which you can access by right-clicking on the desired loads region. Depending on the status of the load you select, one of three versions of the shortcut menu will appear. The right side of the loads window is the batch monitor pane, and this is where you monitor the batching process. If there is more than one load on the stack, the additional loads will be displayed in the monitor in the order they appear in the stack. You can scroll the monitor pane up or down using the scroll bar. You can also click on a stack load, and the monitor pane will jump to the related load. Other than scrolling the pane and resetting out of tolerance materials, there is no interaction available on the monitor. However, if Enable Last Load Display is set to Yes in configuration, you can hover your mouse cursor over the material's way up page to reveal a tooltip that shows the same information that is displayed above the gauges. This information is initial amount of weighed and the amount of weighed in autocorrect. Before a batch is started, the display will assume a status similar to the one shown here and is identified by a blue header region showing the load information and what is entered when the load was set up. Additionally, a number of draws for split loads is shown, as well as a current moisture reading, water to cement ratio, and load number. Underneath the header are ingredients that define the product. To the left of each ingredient is the grayed out disabled button, which becomes enabled when the material weighs out of tolerance or when weight inspect is enabled. Under the material names is shown the percent weighed followed by the actual weight and target weight. To the right of each of the rows, a graphical display that reads from 0 to 100% of the material weighing. When a batch is started, the materials will weigh, and the change of status to charging and the percent weighed, actual weight, and graphic display will update in real time. In addition, a new graphic display will be added to the screen showing the increased weight of the individual scales from 0 to 100%. After all materials have weighed, their status will change to charged. The percentage weight will show 0 or near 0%, and the actual weights will closely match the target weights for their respective materials. The graphic displays for the charged materials will extend to 100% and change from blue to green if everything's weighed accurately. The graphic display for the scales will also extend to 100% when all materials are weighed. An audible sound will also be generated, signaling the end of the charging cycle. When the scales are discharged, the material status changes to discharging, and the graphic display for the scales decreases accordingly. After the scales have discharged, the material status changes to complete. When all materials are complete, the scales reach 0, and then another audible sound is generated, and the monitor and stack panes are updated. The newly completed load will be either removed from the screen or will display in a gray background. At this time, Archer will generate a QC report if one is set up to configure and print. The charging cycle will stop if the material weighs out of tolerance. If the material is underweight, its graphic indicator will be colored orange and the material status will change to holding under tolerance. You can manually add more material to bring it up to weight and then click the red Acknowledge button to continue batching. If a material becomes overweight, its graphic indicator will be colored red and the material status will change to holding over tolerance. Unfortunately, there is no button that will allow you to manually subtract from an overweight material. If you decide that the overweight condition is acceptable for the load, you can click the red Acknowledge button to continue batching. Otherwise, you will need to abort the batch. If a material is filled manually, this will change a material status to holding manual and enable the red Acknowledge button. To continue batching, you will need to finish charging the scale manually with the selected material or materials. You then need to click the red Acknowledge button, which puts the material into a Weight Inspect checkpoint. Clicking the button again moves on to the next material, if any, and the batch cycle will proceed. The Bypass Zero tolerance allows you to use a scale that already has some material in it, usually due to previous aborted batch. By clicking on the checkbox, you can toggle this function on and off. When the Bypass Zero tolerance is enabled, the scale is restored to a scale-ready condition and will allow you to start the load. Archer will automatically compensate for material already on the scales. If the Bypass Zero tolerance is disabled and a scale is not ready, Archer will only allow you to stack the load in the queue. The Load Reviewer is a separate window that allows you to review a list and details the past 100 loads. Canceled loads are not reflected in the list. However, aborted batches are maintained. To open the Load Reviewer, click on the Recent Loads button. The Load Reviewer window is divided into two sections. The upper half is the list pane and the lower half is the details pane. Selecting a load in the list pane updates the display in the details pane for that load. When the Load Reviewer is opened, the contents of the list are sorted by load number. The most recent load is at the top. You can change the sorting order ascending or descending by clicking on the column headers. In this way, you can sort the list by load number, product name, load size, job number, ticket number, start time, end time, or truck number. To view the details of a load, simply click any field of the load you want to inspect. This action highlights the load and updates the details pane of the window. Drag the scroll bar or use the scroll wheel of your mouse to navigate the loads further down or up the list. You can also resize the Load Reviewer window to see more of the list's contents at one time. If you know exactly which load number you want, click on the Lookup button. This action opens the Lookup dialog box, prompting you for a load number to enter. Click in the Load ID field, key in the desired load number, and then click OK. This will cause the Load Lookup dialog box and update the list to show only the load you entered. Whenever the Load Reviewer is open, it is automatically updated with the most recent records. However, any loads batched when the Load Reviewer window is open will not be reflected until the Load Reviewer is refreshed. You can either close the window by clicking on the Done button or reopen it. And you can simply click on the Refresh button as well. This action will repopulate the list, adding the most recent loads and discarding the oldest. As mentioned earlier, the Details pane reflects the load selection made in the list pane. In the Details pane, there are two tabs labeled Details and Notes. Click on one of these tabs, alternates between the load's details and an editable region for adding notes. To add notes or comments, click on the empty region and simply type in whatever information you want to add. Navigating to the other selection or closing Load Reviewer, restore or store your notes. This, as long as the load is maintained in Load Reviewer, you can come back to your notes and edit or delete them. Once the load is discarded from the Load Reviewer, the notes become part of the archive records stored in the database and cannot be changed. You can also reprint tickets or QC reports using the Load Reviewer by clicking on the applicable button. Well, this concludes this session on the plant monitor and the load setup window. Hopefully you have a better understanding of how to navigate the Archer system and batch more effectively. Stay tuned to this YouTube channel for more advanced topics on the Archer batching configuration. Thank you very much and have a great day.